Welcome to the Center of Light Radio with spiritual teacher, intuitive, musician, composer, and best-selling author of The Divine Principle, Anchoring Heaven on Earth, your host, Keith Anthony Blanchard.
Coast to coast, pole to pole, all around the world on the internet, thanks to the marvel of technology. I'm coming at you live on the Inception Radio Network. This is Keith Anthony Blanchard. You're listening to Center of Light Radio, Center of Divine Unfoldment and Reinforcement. Radio for the soul and the transformation station. RPM, recognize, plug in, and manifest. Are you a spiritual seeker who is ready to move forward in your life? If you're wanting to shift from struggling to feeling that life is effortless, send me an email at keithanthonyblanchard@gmail.com and say, hello, Mr. Blanchard. I want my free 30, 45, however long it takes, free session for you to get you well on your way to expanding and beginning to move into that place that you really want. It's not that you're broken. It's just that you just want to expand a little greater than what you have been recently experiencing. And I am just a guy that can push you off the cliff and into your bliss. Again, send me an email at keithanthonyblanchard@gmail.com, and we'll get you on your way to living your passion. You can also go to centeroflightradio.com. You'll see a sign-up form. Fill it out. Not only will you get listen to this, all of my past works up until this moment for free, and they will come in bundles. Sign that form. Something said one day, Keith, it doesn't belong to you. You don't have the right to hoard it. I have to give it away. That's why it can't happen. So sign up on that form there, and I will begin. It will begin a chain of events that will begin to bring these creations of mine into your life. But also, you will get my ongoing newsletter program, which I will start at the first of the year. Also, when you're at Center of Light Radio, the homepage, you'll see a fast-moving Ferrari. Once that car slows down, click on it. It'll take you to my RPM program that I just told you about. Help create those things in your life that you want to manifest, but not only those things on the outside. We're talking about you have to be the fertile ground first. You have to be it. And once you become it, all those things that you require in your life begin to show up. So it's also about spiritual expansion and increasing your intuition and all these really, really cool things. So make sure you click on that Ferrari, and it'll take you to what you will be able to do with your RPM program. Now it's time to get down to Center of Light Radio business. Today, my guest is John DeSouza, and we're going to be talking about clear hearers. Let me tell you a little bit about this phenomenal guest. I've been wringing my hands all week. This is going to be one heck of a conversation, let me tell you. John DeSouza was an FBI special agent working counter-terrorism and violent crimes for over 25 years. He was also an attorney and maintained a top-secret security clearance during his time in the U.S. government. Known as the X-Man, he collected the true life X-Files that he shares now in his books, The Para-Investigators and the Extra Dimensionals. Wow, I love the title of that, The Extra Dimensionals. John DeSouza suggests that most of the assumptions we have had in ufology for the last 60 years have been wrong. In his presentation, The Unthinkable in Ufology, here are just a few of the revelations. John DeSouza will reveal 3 authentic UFO cases on video that he personally knows are non-terrestrial, genuine cases. The Roswell crash is not one of these. Roswell, New Mexico UFO crash and cover-up was a double trick staged by extra dimensionals and the elite powers in control. Smoking gun document. Disclosure isn't a real hope. It is a red herring meant to lead us into a brick wall. That changes the game for some of my thought process. Look out. Revelation will be different. Directed to us from alien visitors on a massive scale. This will be real, all in capital letters. Alien human abductions and animal mutilations are a fraud. Thank you, sir. They are really being done by aliens, but they are not for the purposes they pretend to be. You can find more about this phenomenal guest. We're going to have a phenomenal dialogue at www.johntama.books.com. That's www.johntama.books.com. Welcome to Center of Light Radio, Mr. John DeSouza.
Thank you so much, Keith. It is great being on here with you on Center of Light Radio with you and your great audience. I'm really happy to be here and be able to talk about these topics that are so important.
So, John, I'm 12 years old, and my name is John DeSouza. Did you have any foresight this was coming down the pike for you?
No, not at all. Life happens and things happen for a reason. And when I was 12 years old, more or less, I had experiences of the paranormal long before I became an FBI agent. As a matter of fact, that was part of my my motivation and in becoming a professional investigator was these paranormal experiences that I had over the years that really drove me out of curiosity and intent to find out what was really going on in the world. And that's what I did.
I'm trying to place myself inside of what it would be like to be you once you're an FBI investigator or doing a special agent. When this new door was opened up, and this was dropped into your lap, what was your response to such things? Like, yes, let's go. Can we start now? Or, how did this all happen?
Well, it started when I was, I was about, I would say about 10, 11 years old. And I had my first observation experience with a UFO vehicle that appeared absolutely authentic to me, even at that age. I had my parents taking me into New York City there was a party with hundreds of people there at a rental hall in New York City somewhere, and me and a bunch of other kids, young kids, found each other and were bored being there with the adults, and we kind of spilled out into the night. It was about 1 a.m, probably way past our bedtime at that time. But we spilled out into the night. The streets were kind of abandoned, and we went out playing Rigolevio and a bunch of games, and there was about a dozen kids, and we were just playing out there. We were about a mile away from the safety of the rented hall that had been going on with the party with the adults there. And I got hit by one of the bigger kids. I went down on the sidewalk, and the other kid one of them said, "Oh, he's hurt," and they all went running. They all went running out of there back to the rented hall, and I just was there by myself. It was a very starry night, beautiful starry night, and I kind of was looking up between the two tallest buildings I'd ever seen. At the time, they were projects buildings. Some people may know what that is. And I was just standing up there, and there was one dark spot in between these buildings where there was no stars. It was blotted out, and I just kind of kept looking at it. And out of the bottom of this, it was like a black ink cloud that was just kind of floating there. And out of the bottom of this black ink cloud came these spotlights. Just came out of the bottom and towards me. And that spotlight hit me, and there was like an old-fashioned UFO looking thing with the lights spinning in the bottom. It was a disc shape, appeared kind of metallic, and just started coming down towards me. And that spotlight hit me, that spotlight that many witnesses have told me about, many cases since then. You feel like it just is going right through you. You feel like it's examining you on a molecular level, and it just goes right through you. And then 2 teenage girls appeared on my left side, and they started screaming. They were screaming, hugging each other, and one of them yelled at me. They were looking up the same thing I was looking up at, and one of them yelled at me, "Little boy, you better run home. World might be ending here." And that kind of snapped me out. Of my stupor, whatever it was. And so me and the UFO changed our minds at the same moment. I took a step back out of the spotlight, and the thing reversed course. It went right back up into that black ink cloud, and the black ink cloud disappeared. And I ran out of there, ran back to the rented hall, and that was my first great experience of the paranormal that occurred to me.
So, John, how was it for you to make the transition from counterterrorism and violence as an FBI agent into this field? Was that a practice that took a while, or you just jumped right in head first?
It was completely seamless for me because from my first time, my first years in the FBI, I continued to have these paranormal related experiences. Not only related experiences, but I also started being like a collection point from law enforcement for these types of experiences. That's why I wrote my first book when I left the FBI in 2013, my first book, The Para Investigators, which is all about experiences of law enforcement with the paranormal that occurred to me consistently throughout my career, and that also were brought to me because I gained a reputation as a person that was interested in the paranormal and involved in the paranormal. So I collected many of those stories, and it was quite natural for me. It was quite natural for me to look into that sort of thing and to be involved in that sort of thing throughout my career.
John, what is a clear hearer? Everyone out there in listening land, John has a new book out right now called The Clear Hearers, and this was actually suggested, my guest tonight, Mr. John DeSouza, from another phenomenal guest of mine in the past, Mr. Jason Quitt. He told me he did some work or wrote a forward or something like that, and he said, Keith, I strongly suggest you get John on your show. Tell us about this new book. What is a clear hearer?
Jason Quitt, first of all, the great shamanic healer and teacher. He did the cover for me of this book, and he also did the foreword, which is very, very important, because clear hearer is basically a word for individuals, people that hear a clear voice of authority that comes to them, not through the ears, but through the heart chakra, through the skull, through the skin, and it's a clear voice of authority that comes to them, usually during times of crisis, during times of catastrophe, in times of trouble, and comes to them and always uplifts them, helps them, sometimes even saves their lives. And clear hearers are the people who are able to perceive that voice, to get the benefit of what it's offering, because the entity of the great voice is something very important that comes to people. So this is my new book, Clear Hearers. It's right here over my shoulder, and it's basically the story of my life growing up with my family as well, because whenever I write paranormal books, I have to do it with personal experiences as well. So yeah, that's what, and Jason Quitt was able to write the foreword for me, which I'm very glad of, because he has been a voice hearer, which is something very, very different from clear hearer. And a voice hearer is somebody who has a mental condition that is often treated with drugs or something like that. And it's people who hear voices that are confusing voices. They hear through the ears. And Jason Quitt tells in my book, he tells the story of when he was 15 years old, and he was had a minor operation and was given a drug called codeine, which apparently he had some horrible allergic reaction to, because as soon as he was given that drug, some kind of door opened and all these murmuring voices started coming at him and harassing him. It was a horrible experience for him. But in the morning, he told the doctor what happened, and the doctor just said, okay, no more codeine for him. He has an auditory hallucination reaction to this, blah, 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 and he was never given codeine again. However, and so that was his voice hearing experience, which voice hearing is a mental condition that can occur to people. Clear hearing, several years later, Jason Quitt had a clear hearing experience where he was asleep or trying to sleep, and this great authoritative voice came to him as he was trying to sleep and said to him, do you want to see your past lives? And he just was trying to sleep. He tried to ignore it. And again, this voice came in very loud and said, again, a second time, do you want to see your past lives? And he tried to ignore it, and these things seem to come in threes. The third time it came back, and he said, yes, I would like to. And the voice showed him images of several past lives in it looked like other planets, other realities that he lived, and it showed him the entire breadth of his past lives. And that experience was the beginning of his journey to being a great shamanic teacher and healer, and it started him down that road. That's an example of a clear hearing experience. Although clear hearing is it's an ancient idea, but it's actually just the English translation of the word clairaudience. Clairaudience it's not even an English word, it's French, and it comes from Joan of Arc in the 14th century France, when she was just a 14-year-old, 15-year-old girl who was selected by this great voice that came to her and told her she had been chosen to save France at a time when the 100 Years' War had been going on, and France was about to go out of existence. It was basically 90% taken over by England, and the other 10% was barely holding on. And suddenly Joan of Arc was selected by this voice to come and basically bring France back and unify the nation and have these incredible military victories. So that's where the actual word clear hearing comes from. It comes from clairaudience, and it's just a new label on a very ancient idea as well.
John, would you hold up a copy of your book? The image you have here in the green room is not actually, oh, that is in the back. There we go.
Yes.
Everyone, this is John's new book, Clear Hearers. John, let me ask you a question, sir. I had an experience back in 1996. I guess this would be a clear hearer experience. You know, back then I called it God. Now I call it Source, Creator. In fact, now I don't even have a name for it. I'm sleeping, and like you said, it usually happens in a dark night of the soul. And boy, this was a dark night. Lasted a long time. And as I often said, you know, I said this supplication for a month. I didn't have to say it for a month. I had so much passion and sincerity in my first asking, that door was going to crack open. Well, a month later, after a night of playing music in the casino, 7 sets, and I'm dog tired, I'm sleeping in the bed, and I hear, "Good morning, Keith, it's time for you to wake up." And I look around the room thinking my wife or whoever let themselves in because we had some errands to run, and I didn't hear them knock. So I lay back in the bed with the intentions of going back to sleep and dismissed it as a dream voice. And I hear, "Good morning, Keith, I asked you to wake up." And it meant not only out of your night's sleep, but out of your human slumber. And I knew the gig was up, and I was thrown back on the bed, and I was standing in the presence of the absolute. Now, John, check this out. I smelled the voice. I heard the voice. I tasted the voice. I felt the voice. It was every molecule in the wall. I knew where they come from, what they were doing there, and the possibility of where they were going next. Would this be a clear hearer experience? Is that how you're labeling such things?
Absolutely. But even in the paranormal, everything functions according to rules. And that's what I have observed during all these cases I've investigated. And so several of the rules that make it a clear hearing experience is, number one, that the voice has to be absolutely clear, direct, commanding.
Right.
Not these vague murmuring whisperings of these, these bothersome spirits that tend to, come and bother people. It has to also be, it's there for your benefit. It's always there to help you, to uplift you, to save you, and part of the reason is because of what I believe. And again, I've got dozens of cases I go through in my book, Clear Hearers. And everyone is like, the great voice is God, it's Jesus, it's the angels, it's alien visitors. Everyone has their own ideas. But my book is basically a case study where I put together clues, connections, cases, patterns, modus operandi, and I put these things together over and over again, and I go across even centuries of cases. And my final investigative conclusion is towards the end of the book. It's on actually it's actually in the middle of the book, about page 155, where I say that the entity, that the great voice, when it is the great voice, when it fits these parameters, is actually a great, unknown, unfathomable version of you, of the person themselves. But it is upstream from you. It is this great version of you that stands in the breath of God, that stands in a place that we can't even imagine. It's this great version of you that is, that barely remembers what it was like to be human being, chasing after stuff, but it understands emotion. It understands that connection for emotion. That's why when you're in the dark night of the soul, is usually the first time people have contact with the great voice. It's when they have that horrible crisis, that terrible time. And I go through my own several experiences that I had. And I was about 15 years old when I almost died in a snowstorm where I had made several miscalculations. And this was in New York City. It was a historic snowstorm, 1978. And for some reason, I had gone walking out there. And I'd walked a couple of miles. I was in the middle of a teenage angst, where I was in a depression, and I was in a terrible fighting state with my stepmother. and I wanted to get out of my dad's house, and I just started walking. And unfortunately, I blundered into the worst snowstorm in 100 years in New York City. And people who live there remember many people died that winter from this snowstorm that happened in late 1978. And I just walked for miles until I began to freeze, literally. And I pitched forward into a giant mound of snow, and I just laid there. And I didn't have a plan to harm myself. It just kind of happened. And I was wearing barely blue jeans and a light jacket. And I was in a desolate area where there was nobody. I had walked out of a residential area into a desolate area where there's nothing else around. And I just pitched forward, and I was dying, basically. And just felt like I was going into a wonderful sleep, because I found out later, that's how freezing to death feels. And I was just basically, I was done, basically. And I couldn't even feel my body anymore. And suddenly I just heard, "Get up." And
wow.
I tried to look around, but it was a get up, and people asked me this. It was like a get up that you hear from if you were at a concert and you happen to just blunder next to the giant microphones, the speaker systems, the speakers, these 6-foot speakers for the concert, and you just happen to be standing right there when the bass comes on, when a really hard bass comes on, and it just vibrates, rattles your bones and your teeth. That's what this sounded like, this voice.
So, John, would you say that a person is actually in touch with, they're the clear hearer, but with the voice? Let's call it the voice. I like the tone of that. The voice. For example, when I heard the voice, in my experience, it was, and John, I've said this many times, when I had this experience, it was not a linear experience. It's what I call whole thought. It took my linear mind to process it, down a timeline, but everything it wanted from me was impregnated me in the idea, and I had to meander through it to get it all. There was no time for fear, and it said, "Keith, go sit on the sofa and press record on your tape player." And I did, and my mouth began. I said, "What I'm going to talk about?" It said, "Keith, just be willing to do this." My mouth opens, and I began to log the most far out experiences, information I've ever heard to that point. And then after a year, it said, "Keith, that's enough with the meditation and channeling," to use a word which I really don't like. But to make the point, now take what you've gotten from these meditations and go live it. Go live these principles to make sure they're concrete and solid. So I guess my question to you, sir, is, can we use as a measurement stick the level of the entity or energy that we are in communication with by the fruit it bears in one's life?
Absolutely. Jesus said, "By their fruits you shall know them." And that's, truer words were never spoken. You have to see the results of what the great voice does in your life and what it elicits in your life. And then you know this is an entity that loves you, that cares for you, that will do anything for you. Now, I have to warn you, it doesn't mean it completely understands you, because this is a higher form of life. So there are little things that this form of life is not going to completely grasp, and that's fine, because we need to only go to it for the big questions, the big things. Not, I'm in a fight with my neighbor, and how should I deal with that? Because the great voice doesn't understand niceties like that. It doesn't grasp it. That's why it speaks in, and again, I go through these in my book, The Clear Hearers. I go through all these clues. It tends to speak, and there have been historical clear hearers who have talked about their experience, like Socrates, Winston Churchill. Another one is Philip K. Dick, and a lot of these people, they always give names to their great voice. They give it a name, and I forget right now. Philip K. Dick, the great writer, science fiction writer that everyone's familiar with through movies and so forth. But Philip K. Dick gave a public speech about his great voice, and he talked about it. And he said, when it comes to him during times of crisis, he says it tells him, it takes his decisions that are bad decisions, and it changes them. It tells him, no, that's not going to work. That's another reason why I came to the final conclusion that this entity is you. Because I believe there are laws of divine non-interference, where God, creator force, does not disrupt our free will. It does not. But this great voice does. It does. It will come and it'll take a decision that you made, and it will completely reverse it. And it will even force you, sort of force you, to take the opposite position on something you decided. And that's one of the reasons that I know, at the conclusion of all this, at the conclusion of this investigative file that I put together, that this entity is arguably you, because it is allowed to reverse your decisions, and no one can do that except you yourself, in order to not violate that law of divine non-interference.
You know, John, I actually understand what you said. We all agree that beings who really love you, be it angelic or extraterrestrial nature, there is a cosmic law, and they cannot violate your free will. But I understand completely when you said this voice does remove your free will. I get it, because it really doesn't, but the fact that it gave an appearance, an impression in your life, changes the whole game. It just changes the whole game. And in fact, you almost don't have a choice but to move forward into it.
Right. Okay. Now, let me just give some extreme examples of that. I have a story in my book, and again, these are personal stories. First, like about half the book is related to my own personal experiences and those of my family as well. And I had an experience that's called Teresa the Blessed Virgin. No, I'm sorry, Vision of the Blessed Virgin. And that is a story of me. You want to talk about against my will. This is a story of me when I was infatuated with this young lady at college, whose name was Teresa, and I was greatly infatuated with her. But she was a young lady that a lot of guys liked in my college. This was in upstate New York, and she was a beautiful young Catholic girl, pre-med student, who was very serious about her studies. And she was a very serious young lady. She did not even like dating boys, even though she was a very beautiful young lady. She didn't like dating. She didn't want to spend time with boys. She only cared about her studies. And so me and my friends, we called her the Blessed Virgin. And so we would say to each other, hey, are you going to see the Blessed Virgin tonight? Yeah, but she won't talk to me. She's blah, blah. So anyway, one day I was at the campus pub, and I was just hanging out. I was actually studying in there with my friends, because I would bring my books and study at the campus pub. And Teresa the Blessed Virgin came with her friends, and she was celebrating her birthday, and it looked like she was inebriated. And she came right over to me. She came right over to me, and she announced to her friends that she had found the guy who was going to walk her home, because she was across campus, and who was going to walk her home. And her friends said to her, "Oh, are you sure about that?" And she came over to me, and she gave me a big sloppy kiss on the mouth. Very uncharacteristic for this young lady. And she took me by the hand and then walked me over to her friends and said, my friend John is going to walk me home. And I was in shock. I was in shock at my luck. I couldn't believe it. And suddenly something hit me in the back of the head. And it was like that bass from the speaker that I was talking to you about before. And it was just the words, "Do not go with her." And it just hit me in the back of the head, those words. And I was not going to listen to that. And then the second time it came, "Do not go with her." And again, I was not going to, because I was on my way with Teresa, the Blessed Virgin, and I was so happy. And it came a third time, but it lifted me out of my body. And again, it's like what you said, not linear. It didn't happen in the linear fashion. It's like these things happen all at once. Suddenly all the senses are engaged in a way that we can't understand in the physical. And I was lifted up out of my body and in the astral, because I was taken to a vision of a possible future. And I was in the astral, I was taken to a lecture hall that was across campus, close to where Teresa actually lived. And I was taken to a scene where I was looking at this lecture hall that had been left unlocked, and lights were on in there, and apparently a young man and a young woman had gone in there to hang out, I guess. But I went inside there, and Teresa was being consoled by her friend. She was in tears, crying, and it was a body of a young man that looked like me. It was me in the physical. And I was in handcuffs. and campus police were there, and they were calling the real police, and I was being led out of the scene, and my physical body was crying out to Teresa, tell them what happened, tell them what really happened. Apparently something awful had happened, and Teresa was in tears, and there was a lot of blame, and I could feel hatred being directed towards me from her friends, and I could feel my own sense of being falsely accused in the physical there. But again, it was just a scene that I was being shown in the astral body. And then it was awful. It was a terrible scene. I mean, I could feel the horrible emotions in the air. And then I was lifted back, and I was back at the pub with Teresa grabbing my hand. And I immediately took her by the hand, and I led her back to her friends, and I said, I'm sorry, I had an emergency come up. I cannot go with her. You guys take care of it. And Teresa was confounded because she knew I was crazy about her. And I just walked out of there, and I was shaking. I was shaking because I absolutely believed that vision that I was shown would absolutely come true if I had walked out of there with her. So anyway, that goes to your point of, wow, can it change your decisions? Yes, it can change your decisions, like unbelievably so. So yeah, that's what happened to me that night.
888-919-2355, 888-919-2355 is the number you dial and get on the air with myself or my guest tonight, Mr. John DeSouza, Center of Light Radio, every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. John, we're at the bottom of the hour, boy, these things happen so fast. When you feel that energy, when I do this, man, I can start riding this current and time just flees like that. Would you give out your contact information or anything you want our listening audience to know about you and how they can find you and whatever it is you're doing all across the world?
Sure. I'm at johntamabooks.com. That's my website, of course. And of course, I always invite people to check me out on my Facebook, John DeSouza, which is just DeSouza. If you Google me, you can see all of my interviews. You can see my Twitter also and my YouTube channel. And I'll be very soon. I am coming up on. I am going to the Ufology World Congress in Barcelona, Spain. There'll be 22nd, 23rd, and 24th of June in 2018. That should be really something. I'll be there with many great, well-known names like Donikin. I'll be there with Eric von Donikin. I'll be there with Kerry Cassidy and many others. Also, I will be in April 21st of the new year. I'll be doing George Noory Live in Piper Theater in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I'll be there with Travis Walton, with Melinda Leslie, and Dr. Lynn Katai. That's all that work is based, of course, on my book, The Extra Dimensionals, which is all the unthinkable in ufology. That's
John, I'm sorry. Go ahead. So please continue.
And that's basically what I'm doing. Go ahead.
Phenomenal. Can I go?
Yes. Go.
Yeah. I have some questions from the chat room. Would you mind taking a few questions?
Absolutely. I love that.
Catalina from the chat room says, and John, I got a question or two later towards the top of the hour I want to put to you. But also I want to share with you about my experience with alien-human hybrid Nucleus 8. Catalina asked the question, hi, John, how much of your personal paranormal experience did you allow to influence your work as an investigator? Great question.
Well, that is a great question. Not really much, not really at all, because investigators are supposed to be open to all possibilities, or else they're not real investigators. We're supposed to, and I'll tell you by juxtaposing it. For instance, scientists tell us that scientists will investigate by following the data until the data runs out, and then the scientific investigation stops also. Investigators are not supposed to be like that. Investigators, true investigators, and again, I write about this in my book, Para Investigators. True investigators keep following the clues, the patterns, the modus operandi, even until they reach another world or outside of the physical. It doesn't matter. They're supposed to keep on, and I've always been that way. But my contention is all investigators should be like that. They should all be open to the metaphysical as well as to the physical. Otherwise, I don't think they're really being investigators. Then they're being scientists, and you ain't going to get nowhere. You ain't going to get nowhere in the paranormal just being a scientist.
Yeah, because just on the other side of where you stop could be the nugget.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah, and so you can't stop. You can't just follow the data the way that scientists do.
Don Daniel from the chat room says, was John's beliefs in the paranormal well known when he worked for the FBI, and did it ever affect your career?
Yes, and I would say it only affected my career when things would come up, like, for instance, when we had the minor scandal. And yes, it was well known, and I was referred to by many people who had paranormal issues that would come up. And the only time I would say it really affected my career was in a positive way. But it did affect me when one time after the X-Files show started, and Chris Carter, he got some consultations from FBI guys, and I was questioned for that. I was questioned based on that because they started noticing some of my cases appeared to be coming up in the X-Files when that show started back in I think this was the 90s. I guess it was like the middle 90s, I believe. And yeah, so what happened was Chris Carter was actually interrogated by the FBI higher-ups, and so was I, as to whether I had been giving him any information from my cases.
And this is all just synchronicity.
Yeah, it was. It was, unfortunately. And I was able to say, no, I never had contact with him, and I was not giving him any information from my cases. And he also said to our higher-ups that, well, if they give him the exact cases that they're talking about, then we can look into whether information be given on those. And they were not willing to do that, so they kind of called it a tie and just let Chris Carter go on about his way with the X-Files. But Chris Carter at the time said that he thought they were going to shut him down, which I don't think they have the power to do, but, anybody can say anything.
Someone wants to know if you're still doing the investigation thing every once in a while.
Well, yeah, I do, because I'm always investigating these paranormal cases and to see what's going on with them and what's happening with them. So that kind of stuff goes on all the time, no matter what. I always do.
John, do you ever walk into a hot situation? Hot meaning like, here's a lead. You walk into it, almost regretting as you get closer and closer to what is about to unfold, going, swallow really difficult, like, I don't know what this is. And I don't mean necessarily in the form of physical danger, but yeah, that as well, but more or less just something just strange and bizarre.
Yeah, sure. That happens all the time.
Is that your entire career?
Yeah, that's always happened. But that's the role that we play, and that's what we got to do. So there's never like a doubt as to, oh shoot, should I be doing this? But that's the way it is. You walk into things and you have to address it and take care of it. And that's happened to me many times. Sometimes when I've questioned, should I really be in the middle of this? But it's too late, because you're there and you're the FBI, and there's expectations of the FBI always to be in command of every situation, no matter what. And so that's the image that we got to portray always, no matter where we are.
John, what would be some of the categories under paranormal that you've worked? Aliens, what are some of these different subjects that you have worked with? Well, I can tell you right off I've written about all of them in my book, The Para Investigators, and I can tell you one as an example. The most wide-ranging, impactful case of the paranormal that came up is the case that I call the Indigo Kids of 9/11, which is it's the massive case that occurred where all these little kids were reported by caretakers across to these intel centers right when 9/11 happened, like right after it happened. All of these intelligence centers were stood up all over the country saying
call in anything suspicious, call it in. Anything that could have any connection to terrorism whatsoever, no matter how small, no matter how ridiculous you think it may be, just call it into these centers where we had FBI and local police, state police sitting at these centers, and we'll send FBI agents out and police to investigate these leads. And a lot of people called in, these little kids who had experiences that they let adults know just before 9/11 happened. And I can give you as an example, we had one little boy, and there were dozens of these cases, but just to give concrete examples, we had a little boy who was just doing finger paints in his class the day before 9/11. He's just doing little finger paints in his class, and the teacher comes over to him and says, "Wow, look at this is beautiful, these two tall buildings, and apparently the buildings are glowing, and there's these angels with red wings flying out of the buildings. Where are they flying to?" And the little boy said, "Those buildings aren't glowing." He said, "Those buildings are on fire." And he said, "Those angels,
Wow.
Those aren't angels with red wings. Those are people who are on fire jumping out of the buildings." So she just walked away from a little boy like that, thought it was too much sugar, didn't think about it again until 9/11 happened. And then she called it in. And these cases had to be investigated for any possible connection with terrorism. And to see that this child didn't overhear something or get something from some adults that were planning something, and that's how this came into their consciousness. So these kids all had to be interviewed. There's another little girl who was just playing on the playground by herself, and she wasn't playing with any of the other little kids, and she's just sitting there in a skirt in the dirt, just tracing designs in the dirt with her. And a teacher's aide comes over to her and says, "Sweetheart, you're all right? You're okay being here?" And the little girl said, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just thinking." And the teacher's aide goes to walk away. The little girl grabs her skirt, pulls on it violently, and tells her, "Tomorrow, make sure you stay away from tall buildings, because tall buildings sometimes fall down, and they fall on people."
Wow.
So the teacher just didn't know what to do with that and just walked away from her, teacher's aide. And but the next day, when 9/11 happened, she called it in for any, and again, law enforcement officers probably felt ridiculous having to interview these little kids, because we're talking about the ages from about 6 years old on up to all the way up to 12, and but they had to be interviewed. There was no discretion on that. And so we had many of these cases where that came up. We had another little boy who woke up, who fell asleep on the school bus. Was always usually the first one off the bus at school, but this day fell asleep because apparently was very tired from the night before. And the school bus driver had to come back to wake the child up and get him. And as he was waking him up, the little boy started shouting, was having a nightmare, and was shouting about people jumping out of buildings on fire. And again, the bus driver just woke the child up and sent him on his way. And the little boy didn't think more about it. But then 9/11 happened, and that bus driver called that in as some possible connection. So, yeah, these cases, they happened all over. And it was something that impacted all the law enforcement officers that were involved, because every single one of those cases came back as no connection to terrorism, none whatsoever. You could background check the families, you could background check their contacts, and check the child himself, and they were perfectly consistent that this was just a vision, this was just a dream, this was just some kind of prescient experience that the child had. And so, in other words, the paranormal explanation was the only explanation left in all of these cases. So again, that impacted the law enforcement officers very, very heavily, including myself.
Wow. And it takes the innocence of children. They're not so monkey-minded. They're not so muddle-minded. They are available and ready, and they receive. John, when we were in the green room a little earlier, I began to share something with you. You said, "Keith, let's please talk about that on the air." 1998 happens. I'm attending a spiritual church. waiting for the doors to open. A sister, a spiritual friend of mine by the name of Laura, comes up to me and says, Keith, do you want to meet an alien being? And I said, sure, assuming she was just being the goofy Laura that she is. She was being goofy, but she was serious. She said, follow me. So, John, as I'm walking towards wherever it is she's leading me, I had no idea what to expect. A little green man jump out from behind the building, say, Nanu Net. I had no idea. And she brings me up to the backside of a 5'1" woman. Again, I had no idea. And she said, Keith, I want you to meet Nucleus 8. Nucleus 8, meet Keith Blanchard. When this lady turned around, John, I was slammed with the force. Dear Lord, I was slammed with the presence that was bold. It was masculine coming through this woman who's got a very mousy voice. I can see. I can see. And this was not being faked. This was happening. And so I didn't know what to say at first. And Nucleus says, what do you want from me? And I'm going, what a strange way to greet somebody. What do you want? What do I want? He goes, you need some help with that? I said, sure. He was trying to break the ice. He says, you want, of all things, he goes, you want data. I said, data? So I began to befriend this person for a matter of months. She was married to a 40-year clinical psychologist. So he knows what human behavior looks like. Trust me. He even brought some of his peers into the room, and they said, Rex, you're on your own with this one. And so Nucleus, his name is Nucleus 8. He was grown with the purpose of security, hence Nucleus. He's the center. He's got a finger in every pie in this quadrant of our galaxy. He is head of security in this galaxy. He's named 8. He's number 8 on the board of 12. The time I knew him and hung out with him in a physical presence, he was 4,720 years old, give or take. Yeah.
But you're saying he was a human female, though?
It was working through the body of a human female because when she was a child, she had a lot of abuse, and they saved her. And the contract was when she got older, he would work through her.
Okay.
And we used to have this Sunday gathering, John. Every other week when we had church service, we'd go back to whoever's house. And, of course, he's the alien. He's the teacher of the day. So he begins to put us in meditation, tell us things that we all just salivating to know about. And so one day he calls me on the phone, and he says, Keith, what's going on, buddy? I said, hey, Nucleus, how you doing? He says, Keith, everybody in our group has an implant with you. Do you want one? I make them myself. They're smaller than the eye can see, and I have one left. I said, convince me I want. He says, well, if you're lost, we can find you. If you're in trouble, we can help you. If you're sick, we can administer medicine through it. And he named a few extra perks. I said, all right, what's the drawback? He said, your life is no longer private. He said, but know that no one has access to your file but me. And I will only do that knowing that you would want me to do that for your benefit. He can monitor 6 dimensions simultaneously, John. So he says, Keith, by the next, I said, sure, I want it. He said, by the next time you and I speak, be it over the phone or face-to-face, this will be implanted. I go play at the casino, back to the casino. I can't go play music, and I come back.
Stop gambling. Go ahead.
Well, meaning I play music for a living. I was on stage. Okay. So I came back and go to sleep, and my phone, I come to a state of conscious awareness in sleepscape by this excruciating pain in my right kidney region, and it hurt like you can't even imagine. And so when I look over my shoulder in this experience, this equivalent of what we'd call a 75-year-old, 80-year-old alien woman who probably had to be 6,000 years old, she's going, sending me telepathic thoughts like, Keith, you went into this on some level that was going to hurt, and guess what? You made it right. So this pain, John, was so excruciating, I began to vomit in my experience. And she walks me over to what we would call a lawn chair where Nucleus 8 is sitting, and I begin to vomit all over his feet in this altered experience. My phone in my bedroom actually rings, and guess who's on the phone? It's Nucleus 8. He said, good morning, Keith. I said, good morning, buddy. I said, I just had a dream about you. He said, no, you didn't. I said, man, don't tell me. I just had a dream about you. He said, Keith, you were not dreaming. You were really here. I said, are you sure about that? He says, the vomit all over my feet says so.
Oh, wow.
I've had, John, we need to talk at some other point about some of these far-out experiences I've had with him, pulling me out of my body when literally pulling me out as if I'm tugging on my shirt, but my consciousness is leaving my arm by his tug, finding myself sitting aboard his craft.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, it sounds like you helped me to write my book, The Extra Dimensionals, on some level as well, because these experiences are very much in sync with the stuff that I talk about in that book and the experiences that I talk about. As a matter of fact, I've had a very similar experience with being pulled out of my body by another entity, where I'm part of on another dreamscape. I'm as soon as I go to sleep, I'm part of another landscape where they're waiting for me. And one young lady, I appeared on their scape in front of them, laying down in a sleeping position, and she tugged on my arm so hard to get me up that it actually woke me up on this side of the dreamscape, and I woke up in this side, and I disappeared from over there. That's really amazing stuff. That I really resonate with your experience there with Nucleus 8.
John, I would like to introduce you to Rex Hare, his work. He has 3 books out, something to the effect of Angels, Aliens, Fairies, and Shamans and Extraterrestrials. He wrote 3 episodes, 40-year clinical psychologist. The way this all started for him, and who marred let's call it Star One. Star One was the lady that Nucleus worked through. It happened because he was the doctor and she was a patient. And when she first came into his office, he put her under very light hypnosis. He just put under. And the first entity that stepped up was a fairy by the name of Perithnia. And she said, Star One has been through so much trauma in her life. If you think you're going to come in here and monkey with her mind as has been had in the past, I am going to stop you myself.
Wow.
Yeah, so have you had any experiences to where you were able to see something physically that most people say, ah?
Well, physically, you're saying on this level of reality, on this side of reality, then I would say no, because one of the major hypotheses that I have in all of my books is that even when people are experiencing, let's say, alien abduction. Let's say they're like Betty and Barney Hill. Let's say they're experiencing alien abduction. One of the major things that I see is that not only are extraterrestrials actually extra-dimensional, but also we are also. And I believe that, for instance, in alien abduction and many other experiences too in the paranormal, what's really happening is that the individuals, the experiencers, are actually being translated. Their vibration is being changed so that they believe they're having a physical experience, but instead that's not what's happening. What's happening is they are being temporarily translated into a different vibration of reality so that they now exist on the plane, even for a shorter time, whatever short time it is. They now exist on the plane of the entities that are outside of our dimension, our physical dimension of space. That is exactly why the paranormal can never be proven by scientific means, by physical things, material means. It can't happen. It can't happen because all of these experiences, and I would argue, even people who I respect very much, who are Bigfoot experiencers, I would argue, even if as physical an experience as that actually also involves some translation into the extra-dimensional. So that's why physical is not the right term to use when we're talking about whether something is real or not, because it's all real.
It's all real.
But it may not be
John,
here.
like you, I've come to believe. No, in fact, that word falls short. I know that all the far out, far-fetched things that we think are phooey and just crap, they're more real than they are not real. I come to believe that they are truly, where was it birthed from? It may be a myth, it may be a legend, but where did it come from? And you use the word term. What is your favorite term, and what is your least favorite term in the paranormal?
My most favorite term in the paranormal is, I know what I saw. I just like it because it stands up against scientism, science as a religion, and cynicism, and it just says, I was there. I know what I experienced, and what I experienced was real. And that's what we really need to, maybe not physical, but it was real. And I know I'm real, and I know that phenomena was real. So that's why that's my favorite experience, my favorite saying, and I use it quite a bit wherever I go. And my least favorite, I'm trying to think, it'd be like a three-way tie. There's a bunch of them, but I think my least favorite saying is debunking. Is that's been debunked. This has been debunked. It's all been debunked, because debunking is not really a real thing. You can't really prove a negative, and just because you prove one psychic is a fraud, that's actually better for psychics as a class, because it means that the real ones are going to self-filter to a higher degree of reliability and professionalism. So, debunking isn't real. It doesn't really do anything. You cannot prove a negative. You can't prove, by proving that one instance of Loch Ness Monster wasn't real, it doesn't prove that there's no Loch Ness Monster. As a matter of fact, after 1,000 years, there's more sightings of the Loch Ness Monster than ever. And that's the case. Same case with Bigfoot. And so, I have a persistent consciousness theory, which says whatever phenomena has persisted in the minds of men for 100 years or more tends to have a basis in reality, and basis in truth. Sorry, not reality, but truth, because otherwise it would just filter out of our consciousness after just a short time. And that has happened, so that's what I believe.
John, thank you for being an enlightening guest here on Center of Light Radio. We are at the top of the hour. We got a matter of a couple of minutes. You are always welcome here, sir. That door is always open to you, that's for sure.
All right. Thanks so much, Keith. It's been great being here with you on Center of Light Radio with you and your audience. It's awesome.
Yes, I'm gonna be in touch with you soon. I'm gonna send you some work from Dr. Rex and just some other things that might make for some good exchange between you and I. I really appreciate your presence, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Keith. It's been awesome. Thanks.
Yes,
Keith.
Mr. John DeSouza, everyone, and you can find him at John. Let me make sure I get this right. Got to do the service. I think it's JohnTamaBooks.com. Is that right?
Yes.
JohnTamaBooks.com. You can find more about my guest tonight. Everyone, Mr. John DeSouza, next week on Center of Light Radio, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday night. If you're a social media person and you see this spiritual guy dressed up in flower child kind of garb, his name is J.P. Sears. He does a lot of spoofs on spirituality, but yet, in these spoofs that he does is a lot of truth. He's going to be on Center of Light Radio. I wish you all a wonderful evening. Remember, if you have nothing to do at night, since you're doing nothing anyway and you're laying down about to go to sleep, breathe yourself into oblivion. Breathe, breathe, breathe. And 10, 15 minutes of that, you'll find yourself in a space of absolute deafening silence. And in that silence is everything you could possibly imagine and or want. Ease into bliss. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. I love you all. Peace, love, and light.